It's great to be back, and it's such a thrill to see so many familiar faces before the show out in the lobby. I'm glad you made it, buddy. It is. It's just great to be back. I love this venue. I'm just getting to know the folks who are working here at this venue, some of whom were in San Francisco previously. So it's nice to see them again. And it's a delight. And everything that Beth said, at least about here, is true. The stuff she said about me, I think she was making a lot of it up. But please, join us the whole week, because what we're trying to do with this festival, Film Noir A to B, is as much as possible recreate the actual film-going experience from the era in which these films were originally made and exhibited. A lot of people over the years have referred to film noir as B movies, which is not necessarily true, because over the years a certain pejorative quality has attached itself to the idea of a B film. They really were just films that were made for the bottom halves of the double bills. They were primarily genre pictures. They would be westerns or adventure stories, Jungle Flight with Aang Savage, something like that, and crime thrillers and things like that. They were also the B trenches, as they always called them, were places where really great innovative filmmakers got their start. And so it's not coincidental that a few times this week we'll be showing a B film, a very early film by a filmmaker who would go on to become very successful, an A-list director, who would eventually become synonymous with this whole film noir movement. So this is something that is very, very important to the whole thing, is that you immerse yourself in it so that you can really get a sense of what was happening in the movie business at the time, and not just on looking at these films in hindsight. We wanted to feel like this is what was happening at the time. And to that end, we've even tried to construct the whole festival in a chronological order. So tonight you're going to see movies from the earliest part of the film noir movement, and we'll move progressively through the 1940s up to 1950 at the end. And all of the films you're seeing, with the exception of tonight, I fudged a little in the early days of the movement, you'll be seeing an A picture and a B picture from the same year, and in some cases from the same studio. So it'll be a little bit of a history lesson as we go along as to how Universal might have done things differently than Columbia, who did it differently than 20th Century Fox, who did it different than Warner Brothers or RKO. So this is something that leads me to my next observation. Now, how many of you are coming to a Noir City Festival for the first time? Don't be shy. Put your hands up. This isn't the RNC. You won't be moved. Okay, so that's a good amount of people, and I'm thrilled to see that. But it does mean you have to listen for a couple of minutes about my pitch for the Film Noir Foundation. Because the reason we do this is because it is becoming more and more difficult to exhibit these films in the original format in which they were made. So we're presenting you with 35mm prints all this week. It's getting very, very hard to find and maintain these prints, even though in many cases, in fact, most of the cases you'll see this week, these movies are owned by some of the biggest entertainment conglomerates in the world. Boy, there's a story in there. How we can actually just discard our culture if it's not making a sufficient amount of money. In case you didn't know it, that was my pitch for bring your friends when you come back, because nothing speaks to these people like a full house, right? That they can relate to. But the Film Noir Foundation was created when we realized there was a real appetite for this. I have come to call film noir the gateway drug to classic cinema, because more young people will relate to these movies than any other, and if especially young guys, although I'm not leaving the gals out, because Noir City has the most gender-mixed audience of any of these classic film festivals. And it's just really important that younger people be able to see these films in the format which they were originally created. And the Film Noir Foundation, years ago, I discovered when I would look for a film that had fallen out of circulation and it was gone. and you couldn't find who owned it. And these films are called orphans, and they've been discarded over time, and there's nobody there to protect them. So all the money that we make from the Noir City Film Festivals and the grants that we apply for and the fabulous donors we have, the people who subscribe to our Noir City Quarterly magazine, all of that money goes into finding and restoring lost films. 2 of the films in the festival this week, The Guilty, a B-movie adaptation of a great Cornell Woolrich story, was a completely lost film that was restored by the Film Noir Foundation, as was a terrific picture called Woman on the Run with the great Ann Sheridan, which was not even a B picture. That was an A picture that somehow got lost. I'll explain that whole story the night we show it. But this does happen. And I don't want to be a downer on opening night, but I will tell you this. Today, just today, I learned that 3 movies that I have shown this year in 35mm at other Noir City festivals have been removed from circulation. You cannot show these films in 35mm anymore. They belong to a major entertainment conglomerate. They just decided, you know what? And this is why I feel bad sometimes, because I'm the guy who was killing these movies, because I want you to be able to see them. So I booked Deception 4 times this year, and to this studio that was 4 times too many, perhaps, because now that only existing print of the film is at risk, because it's getting too used. So it goes into deep storage. But is there a digital cinema package? You know, have they made a DCP of the movie? No. It's just going into deep storage, and the only thing you have is something online or maybe a DVD, but there's no guarantee of that even. So sometimes, I said to somebody today, sometimes I feel like Indiana Jones with that boulder rolling down after him, because it's like, wow, these films are disappearing, and this is all coming so fast that there is a sense of urgency to all of this. So something I bring up, if you're interested, talk to me about it during the week. I will be around. I don't want to get on my soapbox every night. I promise. It'll be like, you don't have to watch the same trailer every night. You don't have to hear my same rap every night. But it's the reason we are here. So if you are interested in that, just speak to me directly, and I can fill you in on that background. Okay, now, for the first show of the night, I Wake Up Screaming is a movie that does not get talked about very often when people talk about the essential films at the beginning of the film noir era. There are many reasons for that. It's because The Maltese Falcon steals all the thunder because it came out the same year, and everybody likes to cite that as being the start, the official start of the film noir era, because Humphrey Bogart's in it and Dashiell Hammett wrote it. But I Wake Up Screaming, as those of you who have already seen it, and those of you who are about to see it for the first time will soon attest, has all of the hallmarks of a classic film noir, much more so than The Maltese Falcon. But when this movie was released by 20th Century Fox, people mistakenly thought that it was a musical, because they changed, right, because it wasn't called I Wake Up Screaming. Because Betty Grable, who was 20th Century Fox's biggest female star, was the lead in this film, people would assume that she would be in a musical, so they changed the title from I Wake Up Screaming to The Hot Spot. Now, in the movie, of course, the hot spot refers to the police interrogation of putting somebody in the hot spot to get information out of them, but everybody assumed if Betty Grable was in the movie, it was about a happening nightclub and jumping and jiving. So it was a total failure when they released this film in the summer of 1941. By the time this film was reissued under the title of the original novel, I Wake Up Screaming by Steve Fisher, America was now at war. And there are several incredible moments in this film where in the 2 months' time in between, they actually went back and re-recorded dialogue to make reference to the war. It's kind of fascinating. You'll see when there's a telephone call, you will note a particularly overdubbed line that refers specifically to what was happening in the Pacific at that point. Victor Mature, who's known for his Sword and Sandals movies and all that, is particularly good playing an urbane and urban character in this movie. And Carol Landis, if you don't know Carol Landis, I'm sure she'll make quite an impression on you in this film. She was rather voluptuous as an actress for that time, and was well known for her figure, and was quite a great comedian, but had a very short and tragic life. Google that. But one of the crucial characters in this film is the cop, Ed Cornell, played by the great Laird Krieger. And this was one of his first appearances on film. He became somewhat of a sensation at 20th Century Fox, playing villains, and he was somewhat of a precursor to Vincent Price. Laird Krieger also died very young. He was only 26 years of age. He died, you'll see, he's massive in this film. And he wanted to be a leading man, and he went on a crash diet when he realized they realized he was an extremely good actor, and they gave him these heavy roles in a number of films. And then in an attempt to become the next Tyrone Power, he went on a crash diet that actually killed him. And kind of, in a way, opened the door for Vincent Price to sort of take over a lot of the roles that before that were played by Laird Krieger. The movie is directed by H. Bruce Humberstone, a man not related to film noir in any way at all. He made a lot of musicals and comedies at 20th Century Fox, but Ed Kronjagger, the cinematographer, you will see, this is hardcore noir, visually. And of course, you know it's film noir because there will be an appearance in this film by Elijah Cook, Jr. Film noir. So, having said all that, thank you. I exhausted myself, and I hope I didn't exhaust you. And this is it. We're out of the gate. You won't believe how fast this all goes. It's going to be Thursday before we know it. But thank you all very much for coming, and please stick around for the second half of the double bill, because that print of Stranger on the Third Floor comes from the Library of Congress, and it is the only 35mm print of that film left, and it is a real treat. So, thank you again for coming, and enjoy I Wake Up Screaming!